supply and demand conditions in the labor market to come into better balance over time, easing upward pressures on wages and prices. The median unemployment rate projection in the SEP rises to 4.5% at the end of this year and 4.6% at the end of next year. Inflation remains well above our longer-run goal of 2%. Over the 12 months ending in January, total PCE prices rose 5.4%, excluding the volatile food and energy categories. Excluding those, core PCE prices rose 4.7%. In February, the 12-month change in the CPI came in at 6%, and the change in the core CPI was 5.5%. Inflation has moderated somewhat since the middle of last year, but the strength of these recent readings indicates that inflation pressures continue to run high. The median projection in the SEP for total PCE inflation is 3.3% for this year, 2.5% next year, and 2.1% in 2025. The process of getting inflation back down to 2% has a long way to go and is likely to be bumpy. Despite elevated inflation, longer-term inflation expectations appear to remain well anchored, as reflected in a broad range of surveys of households, businesses, and forecasters, as well as measures from financial markets. The Fed's monetary policy actions are guided by our mandate to promote maximum employment and stable prices for the American people. My colleagues and I are acutely aware that high inflation imposes significant hardship as it erodes purchasing power, especially for those least able to meet the higher costs of essentials like food, housing, and transportation. We are highly attentive to the risks that high inflation poses to both sides of our mandate, and we are strongly committed to returning inflation to our 2% objective. At today's meeting, the committee raised the target range for the federal funds rate by a quarter percentage point, bringing the target range to 4.75% to 5%. And we are continuing the process of significantly reducing our securities holdings. Since our previous FOMC meeting, economic indicators have generally come in stronger than expected, demonstrating greater momentum in economic activity and inflation. We believe, however, that events in the banking system over the past 2 weeks are likely to result in tighter credit conditions for households and businesses, which would in turn affect economic outcomes. It is too soon to determine the extent of these effects, and therefore too soon to tell how monetary policy should respond. As a result, we no longer state that we anticipate that ongoing rate increases will be appropriate to quell inflation. Instead, we now anticipate that some additional policy firming may be appropriate. We will closely monitor incoming data and carefully assess the actual and expected effects of tighter credit conditions on economic activity, the labor market, and inflation. And our policy decisions will reflect that assessment. In our SEP, each FOMC participant wrote down an appropriate path for the federal funds rate based on what that participant judges to be the most likely scenario going forward. If the economy evolves as projected, the median participant projects that the appropriate level of the federal funds rate will be 5.1% at the end of this year, 4.3% at the end of 2024, and 3.1% at the end of 2025. These are little changed from our December projections, reflecting offsetting factors. These projections are not a committee decision or plan. If the economy does not evolve as projected, the path for policy will adjust as appropriate to foster our maximum employment and price stability goals. We will continue to make our decisions meeting by meeting based on the totality of the incoming data and their implications for the outlook for economic activity and inflation. We remain committed to bringing inflation back down to our 2% goal and to keep longer-term inflation expectations well anchored. Reducing inflation is likely to require a period of below-trend growth and some softening in labor market conditions. Restoring price stability is essential to set the stage for achieving maximum employment and stable prices over the longer run. To conclude, we understand that our actions affect communities, families, and businesses across the country. Everything we do is in service to our public mission. We at the Fed will do everything we can to achieve our maximum employment and price stability goals. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
En resumen, la Fed subió 25 puntos base a la tasa de interés de referencia en su reunión de política monetaria que culminó hoy, miércoles 22 de marzo, una medida que refleja un cambio en la estrategia restrictiva del ente central tras la crisis bancaria en Estados Unidos. El Comité Federal del Mercado Abierto de la Fed llevó su tasa de interés del anterior 4.5% a 4.75% al nuevo rango de entre 4.75% al 5.0%. Recuerda dejar tus like o comentarios, esto me motiva y ayuda a seguir mejorando el contenido del canal. Gracias.